Amanda Viviers, who is an author, a public speaker, and a radio presenter. She has published 7 books. Her bestseller, Dear Single Self, was designed to encourage women of all ages in between season of waiting. From a corporate leadership setting, she unexpectedly found herself at 36, married and a new mom. From this season of change, her innovative communication style is full of stories about flexibility, strength, self-care, and re-establishing your identity in the changing seasons of life. Her online journal is a CMA Best Digital Media Project Award winner. She is a presenter on radio across New Zealand and Australia, and she is the co-founder of Kin Women, a networking created to inspire women to start conversations that matter. Along with her husband, she's the co-owner of surf brand Maximus and Liberty. They manufacture surfboards, stand-up pedal boards, and merchandise to fund youth surfing projects globally. She worked on staff at Riverview Church for 12 years, mostly in the field of creative arts, finalist in the Telstra Young Businesswoman of the Year and Community Services Award. She has a Bachelor's of Art majoring in History and Literature and studied musical theater at WAPA, W-A-P-P-A. Driven by a passion of social justice, she loves supporting projects for children in developing countries, teaching children to live creative lives beyond the circumstances, and is something she pursues daily in her life. She's the wife of Carl and mom of Maximus and Liberty. She lives a creative life, helping people finding her voice. An author of Capture 30 Days of Inspiration, Capture 30 Days of Inspiration 2, and Capture 30 Merry Days, and Dear Single Self. I don't think I will finish introducing this lovely lady who has joined us today. Please join me in welcoming Amanda Viviers. Ooh, Amanda, hi. Hi.
Sippo, I need you to come with me wherever I go. You're full of so much life and zest and joy, and we need that on a Friday afternoon in Perth.
Thank you for joining us. This is your time, and over to you today. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, sometimes when you hear yourself introduced that way, you can find yourself going, okay, how much have I done in one life? But it is such a privilege to be here with you. It is the afternoon in Perth, in Western Australia, and it is the morning in South Africa. And I am so grateful to take some time to encourage you around creativity. Why don't you tell me whereabouts you are coming from today, so I can have a look in the chat and I can read along with you. And to start my presentation today, I wanted to read a prayer for the creative, because that is something that I really want to encourage in you today. And if you think that creativity is all the weird things that sit on the fringe, hopefully by the end of today's session, you will think of creativity more as curiosity and co-creation with God, and the opportunity for us to do beautiful things for the kingdom. So let me share my screen, and I am going to read this prayer to you today. And my session today is called Change Your Story, a personal renaissance of creativity. As we timidly enter this creative life, dipping our toes in the water, testing the temperature, as we wade deeper, finding our way, our steps uneven and unsure, seeking firm footing. as we slowly submerge even more of ourselves, relaxing into the current of our art. May we navigate the ebbs and flows. May we learn when to float on the tide of inspiration and when to escape the eddies of self-doubt. May we ride the swells of emotion, the crests of confidence, the lulls of apathy, and the troughs of despair. May we stand strong in the pummeling waves of too much, too sensitive, too loud, too colourful, too introverted, too invested. May we know that we have been divinely created to grasp in our hands the elusive trickle of ideas, gathering each drop to make emotions come to life. May we allow ourselves to be a channel, letting our gift flow through us and releasing it when required. And out of the overflow of our hands, may we give sustenance to those who are parched and dry. Let me pray. God, I thank you for every single person that is in this room today. And Lord, I think of the hundreds of thousands of people that they impact and they make a difference to in their everyday life. Lord, I pray that you would show us a way to be able to live out the calling that you have for our lives. I pray that you would show us how to continue to move forward in the things that you have for us. God, I pray for our creativity, that as we spend time in this conference together, that you would fill us with your peace, that it would surpass understanding, that it would guard both our hearts and our minds. God, I thank you that you are present with us. God, I thank you that you are for us. God, I thank you that you are in and through everything. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, my lovely friend, her name is Jodie McCarthy. She wrote that prayer for the creative, and we work together a lot. She's a poet, and she wrote it specifically for the launch of my latest book, which is called Dear Creative Self. And today I wanted to take some time to talk you through the different spheres of the creative process and how each and every one of us are a part of a creative process in our every single day. And I'm not sure about you, what your year has looked like. I've never visited South Africa, even though my husband is South African. I've never been to the continent of Africa, and it's my hope one day to do so. But today, maybe I'm visiting in your lounge room or in your office, maybe in your church building, maybe you're listening in a car and you're listening through your mobile. But I just want to encourage you that your creativity matters. The letter that you bring of your life to the world around you, to the radio waves, to those places of television, to your church pulpit, your creativity matters. And the thing that I'm passionate about is understanding that in the beginning, God created. And in the midst of that creation, he looked back and he said, "It is good." And so often when I spend time with creative people, I often find that they look back and they criticize the way that they are creating. There's a negative self-talk that comes into the industry of creatives. And so that's why I called this book Dear Creative Self. And it talks about the letter of our life, that every single one of us has a letter of our life, the way that we are speaking, the way that we are able to then engage in God's word and in the work that he has for us. So let me share my screen again, and I'm going to show you the creative spheres that we're talking about. And let's begin with this scripture that says, 2 Corinthians 3, 2-3 from the Passion Translation says this: "For your very lives are our letters of recommendation, permanently engraved on our hearts, recognized and read by everybody. As a result of our ministry, you are living letters written by Christ, not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not carved onto stone tablets, but on the tablets of tender hearts." When I first read that scripture and that paraphrase of that scripture, I found it so interesting to think of my life as a letter. If you were to think of your life as a letter and people were reading your life, maybe when you met someone at the cafe, maybe your family as you sit around the dining table, there are parts of our life that people are reading, our creativity, the way that we participate in social media, the way that we sing and we praise in the midst of our church buildings. Our hearts and lives are letters that other people are reading. I remember a time when I was in a shopping centre and I was walking through the shopping centre, and it was after a big day of work. I worked at a church then. I was a pastor in a church in the city of Perth, and I was walking through the shops, and then I went into a clothing store, and I'm sure my husband would be very scared of what was going to happen if I went into a clothing store to buy new clothes. But anyway, I walked in there and I went into the changing rooms in Perth in Western Australia. We have changing rooms, you try on the clothes. So I went to go in there and this lady stopped me and she said, "I need to ask you a question." And I was thinking, okay, what's happened? Is there something wrong? Are you okay? And she just looked at me and she said, "Who are you?" And I looked back at her and I was like, "I'm Amanda." And she's like, no, "Who are you?" And I was like, "I'm Amanda." And she was like, no, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a pastor of a church. I'm a writer. I love to help people with creativity." And she looked at me and she said, "I'm on my dinner break and I work in the little supermarket. And I'm on my dinner break and I've watched you walk up and down the shopping centre aisles and I've watched who you are, and there is something different about you. There is something that is shining, and I had to ask who you are." Corinthians says, "For your very lives are our letters of recommendation, permanently engraved on our hearts, recognized and read by everybody." There's a local cafe that I often go and write from. So I sit and I spend most of my days writing. And there is the owner of the local cafe, her sister was a Christian. And her sister had said, "I saw Amanda writing in your cafe," to the cafe owner. And the cafe owner came up to me and she said, "I am an atheist. I don't want to have anything to do with your God, but I'm so glad that you're here in my cafe." And I was like, okay, thank you. But over a couple of years, I built such strong relationship with my friend. Every time, I wouldn't say very much, I would just go and write in her cafe. But she came to me 2 years later and she said, "You've created a spiritual awakening in my life." They were the words that she used. She said, "All you've done is just come and be present in my cafe every single week." Creativity has the power to change us from the inside out, to carry the heart of God in such a way that people are changed by the presence of who we are in their everyday. This version of Corinthians says, as a result of our ministry, you are living letters written by Christ, not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not carved onto stone tablets, but on the tablets of our tender heart. My question for you today is this: what letter are you writing to your creative self? Across the years, I've had many different encounters where I've been able to mentor creative industry professionals. And the thing that I've found in the midst of the creative process is, because it comes from the inside out, it comes from those places, of those deep places in our relationship with God, it is very easy for us to become tired, to become frustrated, to become sad at collaboration when you've given an idea and you've given everything that you've got, and then it's had to change. I'm sure that the people who have been a part of this year's conference have had to do so many different things in the midst of the season that we find ourselves in the world. They've had to pivot. They've had to come to the ideas with new ways. You've created an online conference, and there's parts of that you've had to surrender, and you've had to be flexible, and you've had to let go. And sometimes that can be tiring, to always coming up with a new idea, feeling like another blog, another email, another person to talk to. Well, I believe that there are 7 spheres of the creative process. And in the midst of those spheres, the way that we reframe our creativity and allow the Spirit of God to come and feed us, to nurture us, to co-create with God, the way that we do that completely changes the way that we access our places of creativity. I think sometimes we can just hold on too tight to our ideas. And that's why I love Jodi's prayer, the poem that she penned, when she said, "We stand strong in the pummeling of waves of too much, of too sensitive, of too loud, of too colorful, of too introverted, of too invested." I wonder what your too much sentence is that you speak to yourself about your creativity. Because the interesting thing about our creativity is this: it comes from the inside out. It comes from our relationship with Jesus. It comes from those deep places. And in Matthew, when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees, he talked about cleaning the inside of the cup, being this place of purity. And often I think we look at creative industry professionals and we look at the external, but God sees the internal. He sees our heart. He sees our purity. He sees our intentions. He sees our agendas. He sees the conflict. He sees the manipulations. He sees the ways where maybe we just settle in areas that we shouldn't. And the creative process is a beautiful way for us to remind ourselves of all the different parts of creativity and the spheres that we step into, and the power of creativity to bring change. So the first 3 parts of the creative process that I talk about in my book, Dear Creative Self, is this: emotional well-being. How is your well-being? How is your soul? How is that space within you? Because the interesting thing is that our creativity comes from that connection with God, from that place where we connect with Him. Let me open up my book and read to you from a little place from that section of emotional well-being and create that scaffold of creativity. There is a scaffold of routine that my creative self both loathes and loves. I crave the rhythm of an office timetable, the coffee clock that ticks, and meetings with agendas set by others. Yet when I lived in that culture year after year, my creative self banged on the doors, screaming to be let out and explore the wild fields of my mind. There must be moments of structure in my creative diary and planning, but also huge chunks of space to be open to the spontaneous and surrender of dreaming up something new. We cannot structure creative ideas. They come at the end of a long, winding conversation. Ideas pop up in the shower. They visit in the middle of the night, and they arrive at the most inopportune times. We need simple systems that help us collate our creative pursuits so that we are free to roam and explore within the structure of its safety. So that chapter goes on to talk about how there is a scaffold to creativity, and finding ways to be able to really set that scaffold up to be able to help you to find the information and the ideas that you need. See, often in mentoring creatives, particularly writers, I have a lot of them that say, I don't want any structure at all. And I say to them, without structure, you don't have the safety to be able to come up with the ideas within the midst of what is happening. And I think that's an important part of our emotional well-being. That structure creates a safety around that sense of when the ideas come, the scaffold helps us to really have an emotional sense of well-being around what we're doing, so that we're not available 24/7, that we have space to think, that we have space to come down from the high of a conference or the high expectations that come from stressful situations. It's important that our soul has time to recalibrate. And I find that the way that my soul recalibrates is really important things like sleep, like great food, eating great food, like beautiful songs of worship, like having space within my house, like reading good books, times of quiet, times of solitude, discipline, to really recalibrate that space of the soul. The second part of a creative sphere that I want to speak to is connection and collaboration. I'm not sure if you've ever sat in a committee meeting and tried to pull together an event or do something where you're working with someone else. Maybe you've produced an album, maybe it's your radio station and it's the staff and the team that come together for that radio space. Creativity is impacted by the people that we connect with and the people that we collaborate with. And so often I think as creative individuals, it's easy to think this would be just easier if I went at it alone. But I do believe Proverbs when it says that iron sharpens iron. And I do believe in the power of connection and collaboration. And I do believe that there is so much more that I can do with a group of people than what I could ever do by myself. That's the power of this conference. That's the power of the networking spaces where you get to talk and connect and help one another. Every time that we share information with one another, we are not one another's competition. The end goal for us is for people to come to know the saving power of Jesus Christ. And if we hold back information because we want to isolate ourselves or make it all about us, we lose the beauty of what connection and collaboration means. And as a creative person, the letter that we are reflecting to other people can often be impacted in this area of connection and collaboration. So my question is for you, how are you going in this area of the creative sphere of process? How is connection and collaboration? My next question for you is about rest and sleep. I love to make sourdough bread. It's something that I love to get my hands all sticky in the dough with. I love to take time to do it. But do you know what the best part about sourdough bread making is for me? It's not actually the bread at the end of the day. It's the fact that the bread needs a time to rest. The bread needs a time to take its time to be able to go to that space of proving. And I think in creativity, sometimes we can forget, especially in our now culture, where social media has created this place where we're just producing ideas over and over and over and over again. I think ideas need a proving time. From beginning to end, it takes nearly 3 days to make one loaf of bread. And I think we need that space and time to allow ideas to prove. And I think sometimes we can think that if we've held on to an idea for a really long time, maybe it's an idea for a book, maybe it's an idea for a television program, maybe it's an idea for a radio program, maybe there's a part of you that wants to step out in ministry and do something fresh and new, but you feel like it's closed door after closed door after closed door. Let me come before you and say that rest is an important part of the process. Sleep is an important part of our emotional well-being. And as creatives, if we stay up late till really late and we're up early in the morning, there will come a place where those two ends will start to burn out. And I think an important part of the creative process is that we take time to rest and sleep. We turn off our phones. On the weekend, I have a rule. I have no phone on a Saturday. I turn it off. I put my phone away in a drawer and I take time to rest. I let those ideas settle. I might have lots going on in my mind, but I take time just to rest, reflect, to Sabbath. And the art of Sabbathing is an important process in the midst of our spiritual disciplines. How are you going with your Sabbathing? How are you going with the day of rest? What does that look like for you? Maybe this season that we're going through in the world, the COVID season and all the changes and the isolation and the calming down of events and the repurposing and the pivoting that's happening, maybe it feels a little bit uncomfortable for you because there is more rest. Maybe there's a part of you that's saying, I need to do more, I need to be more. Or maybe this season is extremely difficult for you, and I want to acknowledge that, and that you're caring for a lot of people, and there's so much change that it means that there's a lot of information that you're trying to carry. I want you to know that rest is important. Taking a day off is important. Taking time to recover is important. And if we don't take time to Sabbath, there will come a place where the creative process is interrupted and may even stop. The next part of the creative process is this whole idea of technology. And often I find that there's two different kinds of people. The early adopters, the ones that when they said, okay, this year's conference, the media conference is online, they were the people that signed up first. And then there's a group of us who it takes us a little while to understand and to get used to technology. We live in a day and age that technology impacts our creative process more than ever before. And the thing that I want to encourage you is for two different thoughts for the two different groups of people. The early adopters who are onto it, who have the app downloaded, who know exactly where everything's going, they're the tech people among us. I want to make sure that you have times where you are technology free, where you go for a walk, where you sit around a table without technology featuring, that you take time to rest and recover, like I was talking about in the rest and sleep, and you find ways to put technology in its place, that you are the master of the technology, that the technology is not a master of you. And those who find technology a little bit difficult and overwhelming and painful and annoying, I want to say this to you. Every day, just keep having a go. I think there's this rule that makes us think that with technology, we're going to make heaps of mistakes. And yes, we might turn on the Zoom, and yes, we might be unmuted, and yes, you might hear our dogs barking in the background, but it's not the end of the day. If you find social media really difficult, trying to find ways to communicate your creativity through social media, just keep having a go. Just keep showing up and allow yourself to fail forward. It's an important part of the process. The next sphere that I want to talk about is innovation. What does innovation look like to you? What is the letter of innovation speaking to you about? Because innovation is our capacity to ideate. And to ideate means that we need flexibility. And often as creatives, we can hold too tightly to the idea or the thought that we have. And innovation is holding that idea still within our hands so that we can breathe life into the idea that we've been given. But rather than holding it with tight hands, we hold it with open hands and we see what God does with that idea and the way that it changes. Have you ever come up with an idea that's landed in a completely different place than where it began? I think the way that our brain works is that we fire off all these different signals that help us to brainstorm and to work out ways to make the idea work. And if we don't allow innovation, if we don't allow flexibility, if we don't allow fluidity to be a part of our creative process, then often we get stuck. When I talk to people who are stuck with their ideas, I often say this: how tightly are you holding on to that idea? Because often the best ideas are like we're holding on the back of a boat and we're skiing on water and it's changing and the idea's morphing and it's becoming something that wasn't before. Innovation is an important part of the ideation process. And I want to encourage you in the letter that you are writing to allow innovation to be a part of your everyday. Brainstorm, do crossword puzzles, do Sudoku puzzles, find ways to be able to think differently, listen to speakers like at this conference that you've never met before. You may disagree with the things that I'm saying, and you know what? There is nothing wrong with that. We can each see things from different angles, and that's what makes humanity amazing. The thing is, are we holding on too tight to our idea, to our opinion, and we're not able to find a way to be able to innovate and change and grow and become mature in the idea that we have? My next question for you is pioneering. How often do you meet someone that tells you that they've had an idea that they've held on to for 20 years? As a writer who encourages other writers, I meet people every week who tell me that they've had an idea to write a book. So often they get stuck in the pioneering phase. To pioneer means to do something with the idea that you have. It takes courage, it takes hope, it takes resource, it takes sacrifice. For the people who reinvented this conference, they had to pioneer something new. We're in a season in the world where we are being called to pioneer more than ever before. There is so much that is happening in this space where there is pivoting, where we're able to go into this new place where it is not the same as it was 6 months ago. What idea have you been holding on to that you're holding back? How can you pioneer into the new? And the last creative sphere, which I believe is the foundational creative sphere to any creativity, is our spirituality and our sense of purpose. And they are so deeply entwined together. That's that part of us, that part where God speaks to us, where he says things to us that no one else knows. That's that co-creation with God. That's that part of us that before the earth was formed, that he knew us, that he shaped us, that he formed us, that he created us for this particular moment in history. He knew that we would love media, that we would love communicating, that we would love to help other people, that we love stories, that we love narrative. He primed us for this moment in history. 2020 is not a surprise to him. He knows what is needed in the world in this season, and he created us for that. Our spirituality is the deepest part of our creative process. And without that foundational layer, so much of our creative pursuit can be about our own selfish ambition. And I don't know about you, if you've heard someone who's worshiping and singing to God and the beauty of the presence of God that comes out of their voice and their gift, in comparison to someone who's singing, but they love the sound of their own voice and they're singing in a way that, oh, I'm amazing. The difference between the purity of the sense of purpose between those two things, two people singing, two completely different sounds. My question for you today is, where are you at with God? In the midst of your creative journey, where is that sense of purpose? If you remember what it was like to be a child, what did you dream of? What creative ideas did you have that you wanted to bring to the planet? How did you find those ways to be able to do that well? You are enough, and you have something to say that has never been heard before, simply because it is filtered through the sheer tenacity of your own story. Every one of us is unique. God is writing a letter upon our life, and it is a powerful thing for us to be able to do that with hope and resilience and courage. I believe a personal renaissance is a time of transformative change. This change in attitude, behavior, habits, health, spirit looks radically different for each person. And it always begins with changing our personal narrative on creativity and the way that we speak to ourselves about our productivity. How do you speak to yourself about creativity? Do you speak with compassion, the way that Jesus would be speaking to us? Are you moved with compassion for your own story and how God has done phenomenal things in your life? This is what a personal renaissance is. Psalm 18:24 says this: God rewrote the text of my life when I opened the book of my heart to his eyes. I love that. We need to reframe the way that we speak to ourselves about creativity. Maybe replace the word creativity with curiosity. Maybe replace the word creativity with worship. And out of that place, the letter that we are speaking to others, the story that we are bringing to the planet in this period of time will be impacted. Change your story. A personal renaissance of creativity. Thank you so much for your time that you've been here today. I would love to answer some of your questions. If you'd like to come and follow along, here are some of the places that you can come and find my work and the work that I do here in Australia. But I believe that somebody needs your story. I want to hear your story, your creative pursuit, your passion, your relationship with Jesus, the way that we impact and we bring our creativity. It matters. So thank you, Sipo. I'm going to hand over to you. You might have some questions for me. I'm going to stop sharing this now. I'm going to come back and have a look what I've missed out in the comments as I was focused on all my notes and my stories.
Wow, fantastic. Wow. Amanda, thank you so much for that presentation, which was inspiring for many of us. And thank you for the thoughts, and thank you for taking us through. We will open this time for questions to all our attendees. If there's more questions, please type them on our chat box. Then I will pose them on your behalf to Amanda. Do you want to say something? I see you want to say something, Amanda.
Yes, can I say hello to Viviers from Stellenbosch? My family is in Stellenbosch. So I'm saying hello. If you know the Viviers family.
Hi, Vishwani. Hi, Vishwani.
There you go.
Thanks. I just have a few questions that I've noted as you were taking us through your presentation here, particularly when it comes to emotional creativity versus innovation. I think you'll agree with me that the application of creativity gives rise to new concepts in life. You know, creativity is a capacity to many of us, and it's something that we can all learn, and it's something that we can all use more effectively. But I just want to ask you, what are the biggest barriers to give that creativity at our workplace? You know, we find that people do not understand that they are creative. Maybe they are scared to express their creativity. So I'd love to hear from you as to how can we develop that in ourselves so that we can bring some solutions in many problems that we are faced with in life.
Definitely. Well, I think one thing that we can really struggle with is pride, and we can get really stuck because we don't want to fail. We don't want to do it wrong. So I think really wrestling with our own humility and really surrendering that to God and going, okay, how can I do it your way, God? How can I do it well? How can it not be about my own agenda, but about yours and what you want to do? That would be my first thought. My second thought would be around vulnerability. So being able to sit in that place of passion, you know, as I start to speak, often people are like, Mandy, you're so passionate. And I'm like, well, I need to believe in it. Otherwise, why do it? So finding ways for us to not feel afraid to be passionate, to believe in what we're doing. And you know what? When we're passionate, often we will make a mistake. But the mistake doesn't define us. The mistake actually just humbles us in some ways, that we say, okay, God, how can I do it better next time? What can I learn? How can I become who you want me to become? So I find the times when I marry those two things together, humility and vulnerability, passion, letting go of pride, that enables us to be a conduit for the presence of God rather than a dead end.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Makes big sense. Here we go, folks. I think we're all challenged to be creative in our own space. Here's another question on our chat box from Phil. Phil asks, how does collaboration look like amongst a wonderful multitude of counselors for connection in this current season of distance? I hope it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Can I give you an opportunity to respond to that?
Yeah, Phil, I think in the season that we're in the world, I think that social media and these kind of spaces actually become really important. And I think that we need connection and collaboration more than ever before. So for example, if this season wasn't upon us, I don't think I would be speaking here today. And it's the way that creativity and innovation and technology is changing. And so I think in some ways there's more opportunity for connection and collaboration than there is less. I think it's leaning into thinking differently. So for example, this week I recorded a message. So I was preaching in a church in Melbourne, but I'm in Perth. And I couldn't have done that before. So I think really finding ways to come into really great connection in social media spaces. I think allowing yourself to be open to collaboration more than ever before. And I think just being really open to what the Spirit of God is doing in a collaborative manner. I think also really finding ways to repurpose content more than ever before. I think sometimes we make so much content from scratch, rather than going, how can I repurpose and collaborate with other people on what they're doing and how can we do that well? Hopefully that answers your question, Phil.
I hope so. From my side, it was audible, loud and clear. But I just want to link Phil's question, particularly when we talk about creativity in terms of connection and collaboration. You also mentioned in the presentation that between creativity and technology. I just want to be clear whether technology is killing creativity or technology is enhancing creativity. Because when you look around, the creativity scores are basically dropping. You know, you hardly find people who are creative and innovative with new ideas. Now, I just want to bring some balance in terms of technology and creativity in our lives, particularly in the media space that many of us, or media or communication space that many of us are in. What's your take on that?
I think what's really important is that what technology does is it offers us the opportunity to compare ourselves with what other people are doing. So then often we're not innovative for what God is wanting to speak through us to the group of people that he is asking us to communicate to. So I don't think it's actually the vehicle of technology. I think it's the voyeurism that comes. So voyeurism means that we're watching what everyone else is doing. And then we think we need to do the same as what everyone else is doing. But actually, we need to come back to what Jesus is doing in our own spheres of influence and what he wants to bring, and to stop comparing ourselves to one another. Every person who sits in here, we are not one another's competition. Let me say that again. We are not one another's competition. And each of us has a story that is filtered through our own story and what God is speaking to us about that is unique to what God wants to bring to our audience. And as soon as we try to do what other people are doing just because it looks good, or maybe it's getting good ratings, or we actually need to be true to the story that God has given us. So I don't think it's a technology problem. I think it is a comparison problem.
Great, lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it's very important for all of us to realize that I would call it the emotional intelligence and our emotional creativity in our workspace. Some of us here are in leadership positions in terms of allowing that creativity from people that we may be leading to come up alive, you know, and realizing it. And one other challenge, and I think this would be my last question to you, Amanda, is how do you really become also creative in an unhealthy organization? You know, we find that sometimes we find creative people in organizations, but organizations might not be healthy for them. What would be your take in that, you know, in terms of organizations that do not enhance creativity from individuals?
I think it's a really hard question to answer because everyone's situation is so different. But I think the important thing to come back to is solitude and space, that we actually have that time of rest and reflection to say, okay, God, are you calling me here, like that Esther moment, for such a time as this to speak? Or is it time for me to go and be somewhere else and build bridges in a new place? Because it is so tiring to feel like you're always raging against the machine. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've got another idea, I've got another idea. That's that emotional wellness. So I think it's important that we have rest and solitude. I think it's important in this day and age where there's so much noise. How often do you have just 5 minutes of quiet? No music on. Solitude is one of the spiritual disciplines of time of silence and solitude for us to be able to allow God to speak. And in that place, is he calling you to be Esther for such a time as this, to speak and to speak with courage and to keep on pioneering? Or is he asking you to trust him to move to a new place, to be able to bring the best of who he's created you to be in a new sphere? I hope that's helpful.
Amanda, thank you so much. That's so helpful to many of us, and I think everyone who's connected today, this morning, have gained a lot from your inspirational presentation, and thank you so much. Amanda has posted her, is it your website link? If there's anyone who would love to follow her or just get more information on the wonderful work that she is doing, there's a link that she posted. Sorry?
Yeah, there's my latest book is there from Amazon if you wanted that. And also the prayer for the creative at the beginning is my friend who is the poet. So,
great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Folks, we've just come to the end of our first session for the day. And thank you for tuning in. This is the order of the day after this session. We'll have a 20 minutes break from now until around 20 past 11 or 20 past 11 South African time, Amanda. So until 20 past 11. So I will request all of you to come back around 20 past 11. We'll have our guest performance from Neville D, who will give us that wonderful music. Then we will move to our second session of the day around 11:30 from Matt Bird. We'll be talking about the Cinnamon story, catalyzing church-led community transformation. Folks, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Can I just use Naden's trick here to just allow everybody to wave and say hi to Amanda before we are taken off to the waiting room, so that Amanda can see that she's been speaking to people and not hello.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks. Have a lovely day and God bless you. Thanks, folks. See each other at 20 past 11. Thank you. God bless.